Hello, everybody. Well, welcome. Thank you guys for joining us today. I'm really excited about this upcoming panel, Reimagining the Future of Work. Really excited to hear from our guests. We have Renu from Astucia, Louise from Dreadwords VR Consulting. Whoop, whoop. We have Thomas Kerr, major wealth management firm, and Nirav Desai from Moonbeam. We have an amazing panel today, and we're going to be discussing about digital technologies in the workforce. So super excited. If you guys need anything, we'll be doing a Q&A at the end. Have a great day.
Great. Thank you all for joining us today for the panel Reimagining the Future of Work. I guess we all have our different views of work and coming from different industries. My name is Renu Ramakrishnan, and I'm here with Nirav, Thomas, and Louise. What we do know is work is changing at a rapid pace, right? And from work becoming hybrid, which is almost the norm now, we're going to be looking at the changes that's happening in the workplace and the future of work from a learning, training, collaboration kind of point of view, that kind of lens, and how we can integrate XR into various ways in organizations. And so I'm going to hand it actually off to Nirav to say a quick words about himself and maybe an aha moment, and then to Thomas and Louise.
Thanks, Renu, and it's great to see everyone here. It's been a great conference so far. I'm Nirav Desai. I'm with a company called Moonbeam. We work to connect really innovative next-generation startups, companies, interesting capability with corporate demand signals. We do that using VR and AI. We have a platform for both. I'm not going to get into more of that. What I want to talk to you about more is I've been doing a lot of work consulting with large corporations and governments around how they can leverage VR to change the way they work. And one quick story is I was consulting with the U.S. Navy several years ago, and we built a submarine trainer, helping people visualize undersea environment in virtual reality. The concept was really around how do you take that three-dimensional geospatial bathymetric data and help them visualize it in their mission plans. The aha moment was to see a senior submarine commander who's been doing this for, in and out of San Diego Harbor more than 50 times, had never seen the terrain of that undersea canyon that he would navigate through every day, not every day, all the time. And so there was a progression from, oh, this is an amazing learning tool. I could get my junior navigators to visualize this and see and understand what they're navigating through. As he saw more of the demo, he's like, oh, you know what? I could actually use this to measure this type of data. He got more into it, like, we could really use this as the more he engaged with the data, the more value he saw to it, and the more open he was to it. But the aha moment was really around it's an experiential technology, and unless you see your own data presented back to you, and you start conversing with it, you don't really know what it can do. And so a lot of this is going to be experimentation. We need to try out different solutions, integrate more forms of AI into the experience, and have a conversation with our technology, and that's how we're going to get the most out of it.
Well, nice to meet you all. My name is Thomas Cower, and I grew up in northern Wisconsin, where the land of technology goes to die. And I think it's with some level of irony, or maybe it's destiny because of that. I don't know. I think I've always been intrigued by technology. And so I'm actually on my second career, and I was near the end of teaching, and I was using Vuforia and Unity to have these spheres pop up. And at the time, it's pretty rudimentary, right? But I'm like looking through my monitor screen, and I'm like watching these spheres kind of float above my hand, and I thought, man, this is the stuff. I just think it is so cool. And so I said, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to jump into technology. This is my first love. Maybe that was my aha moment leading with it. There's like a slightly different aha moment, but and so I went and got my master's in technology, innovation, and learning, and my focus was on XR, quite a bit of human-centered design and technology and automation. And I leveraged that to jump into sort of like a middle ground corporate world, just because I thought people are going to, see me in education and how are they going to make sense of me. And so my first job was at the Stanford Graduate School of Business, and I managed about $1.2 million of external-facing courses in corporate innovation and personal leadership. And I started prototyping with XR at the time, especially for personal leadership and negotiations. And the prototypes were rudimentary, 360 video. They were pretty cool. Striver was already proving themselves out in this space. But then it's sort of the aha moment I meant to get to was at the Oculus Connect 6 conference. And I was sort of being like, what am I doing? Like, am I really being involved in this technology in the way I really want to? And I saw hand tracking, and I just thought, which is funny because you're like sitting looking at your hand, right? And you're in awe of your own hand. You're like, this is like where it's going. And I thought of those experiments with phantom limb pain, where you have a mirror and you're looking at your arm on the other side, and as you look at the mirror, your fingers began to twitch. And because it was early days in Oculus Connect tracking, I was looking at my hand digitally, right? You're fully immersed in a VR headset, but my fingers were starting to move. And I thought, this is truly embodiment and presence at its finest. Like, this is only going to get better. So then I moved over to Tesla. I'll just keep that bit short, but did all kinds of stuff. So training, design reviews, factory walkthroughs. I was a global program manager for their XR program at the time with Microsoft. Just got to be experienced to a lot of areas. And now I was like in tech, right? I was in the thing I wanted to get to. Was there for a couple years, and then I'm now with a major wealth management firm, which you could probably figure out if you're on LinkedIn, but I need to say that. And I'm a digital product manager in their innovation factory, which is no longer a factory as Tesla was. Now it's in general innovation and thinking about AI and automation, these sort of spaces. So I would say that's me in a nutshell. So I'm just, I love this stuff, love coming to these conferences, seeing what's what, kind of keeps me sharp. I'm involved in a lot more technology, but I think my first love has always been XR, and that's why I'm here today.
Thanks, Thomas. Second career. Hurry up. I'm on about number 6. When I was a kid, so my name's Louise Edwards, and I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do when I grow up. But I started off desperate to spend my life playing on volcanoes. So I went to school, studied geology, did a stupid thing and got a PhD. Decided my soul wanted to die. But it was the earth and sharing my passion for science and community and all these things has really kind of driven me through. And after some time working for, I moved while I was traveling around. I ran into someone who I quite liked and moved to Canada and ended up in Calgary, which is, to those Americans out here, the Texas of the North, the oil and gas central. And ended up working in oil and gas pipelines as a climate change consultant, had an existential crisis or two, and moved to the east coast of Canada to become a high school teacher. So did a little bit, so really was kind of developed and cultivated that passion for education and sharing science as a high school chemistry and physics teacher. Due to local politics and family things, moved back to the province of Alberta, where they had stopped hiring teachers back in 2019, and ended up in the post-secondary sphere, working in an area of education called competency-based education, which is really working closely with employers and communities to identify really what skills they need, and developing authentic, personalized learning and assessment to help people quickly upskill and reskill to get into the workforce. At the same time, pandemic ennui got me searching for other things to do, and I'd seen VR around. That will be my aha moment that I'll come back to. And I got the opportunity through a company local to Calgary, in fact, Circuit Stream, to learn how to develop in VR. And I have been, over the last 6 months or so, been freelancing, helping in a consulting role, helping people design VR with a learner-centered lens, and doing some curriculum design, and also developing my own applications that focus on building a profound relationship with the planet through VR. And if you ask Angelina in the front, I swim with orcas. But I won't go into that. And my aha moment with VR, so my husband is probably the one who should be sitting here. He's the tech evangelist of the family, at least he was, and he got a Vive back in 2016. And I put that headset on, and I was playing budget cuts and like terrified of these like low poly Android things that I was trying to kill with knives. And I was like, the level of presence and immersion, and even that, like all I could see were the opportunities in the classroom and beyond. And now here I am, and so excited to be part of this panel.
Great. Thank you, Louise. And but my background, I'm Renu Ramakrishnan, and kind of have a background in training, coaching, corporate training. I worked with educational institutions. I teach at the MBA level, business communication. And also I used to be a facilitator at Lehigh University's Iacocca Institute in intercultural competence. So coming into training and coaching in VR via the traditional, in-person, then into Zoom, and now I lead learning experience for Edstudia, which is a immersive learning platform. We have our own VR campus and develop learning programs for organizations in there. And I think my aha moment, which I put on the headset maybe just a year and a half, 2 years ago, and we actually have a training program where we have help instructors or people who would say, how do I get into VR? How do I how do I develop something in VR? And so the instructor certification in XR was something that I had to take myself to learn how can I make a difference, and what's this VR stuff about. And at the end of that, and we had to do group projects, and so we developed our project, and then and everybody obviously was virtual, and then I could actually, high five my partner or the other folks in our group. And I think it seems really small, but coming from Zoom all the time, just the fact that I could be right next to that person who was in Europe, and the other team member being somewhere on the other coast in the US, and one from the Middle East. It was just amazing, and that sense of presence. And from there, for me, I mean, it's small, but I think looking back, that was truly my aha moment. And from there, I'm on and helping develop learning training programs to help organizations take steps to enhance their own training in their companies. So bit of introductions, but we're coming from different backgrounds clearly here, but all within a context of learning, training, collaboration, really when we look at the future of work. But I want to actually start, Nirav, you have your expertise in innovation, in collaboration tools. And how does XR really open up opportunities for people to be part of this global innovation ecosystem?
Yeah, so we're right, thank you, Renu.
Yeah.
We're right here in the heart of Silicon Valley, right? And the old economy was based on co-location. And part of the reason the Valley grew the way it is the serendipitous meetings that people have as they're getting coffee or as they're going on a hike, right? You run into people, you talk to people, you're at dinner, and those chance engagements is essentially a larger water cooler, right?
Right.
We're now in a hybrid world, and we've lived through the pandemic where everyone suddenly switched to Zoom meetings all the time. Every moment of their life was planned. That serendipity went away.
Yeah.
Right, and we still haven't fully recovered. We're starting to get back. It's great to see people in the room again, but networking is amazing, right? But how do we get that when we are now our work colleagues are all over the world? How do I get that water cooler experience? How do I immediately go between a Zoom call where I still want to work through a document together and we want to see each other's face, we want to be looking at the same document, to immediately saying, all right, let's whiteboard this out, let's take a step back, let's be in the room together. And VR allows that, right? I can go seamlessly from a Zoom meeting to a virtual collaboration session, do a whiteboard together, export that out to the rest of my business tools. Yeah, that's what we're building. But that's the future of work, right? It's where geography doesn't matter, right? The first wave of globalization in modern history was in the 90s when the internet started. And suddenly it opened up huge economies of India and China and global supply chains. We're now in this state where we're able to globalize creativity. And that has huge ramifications around the world.
Right.
And I'm excited about it.
Yeah, and also I know you're excited about AI, right? And about how it will influence this, the XR rollout. So, speak a little bit about that and your views on that, how it would help collaboration tools.
Yeah, so thanks for that as well. I mean, AI, it's hard for me to talk about VR without talking about AI.
Right, that's what I said.
And I'm a little bit actually surprised by how little AI has penetrated the VR space. And it's starting to now. But I think AI is really the key. And I view it not as a job replacement, but a human enablement, right? So the amazing thing about VR is I could change environment. I could take someone to any place. I could take them to non-existing places. But when you have to code that every time and deploy it, it's not seamless, right? AI gives you an ability to, hey, let's take this conversation to an offsite. Boom, in a second, we're now at a campfire, thinking outside the box, right? The environment can shape the way we think. What we've done at Moonbeam is we've integrated conversational intelligence into our VR collaboration platform. And now with opening up conversational intelligence, we're extracting insights from conversation. And now your words, your thoughts become living in that space with you. And that opens up huge potentials. I love what's going on in the 2D world with image generation, with creating text. How can we take a conversation and build a work product out of it? So that you and I are talking, and hey, that was a great idea. Let's write a blog about that together. An AI goes out there and gives us the first draft. Not the full blog. We're going to want to edit it and review it after the fact. But we now leave a meeting not with a bunch of action items, but a bunch of work products that have taken off a lot of our load, and we now have a path to collaborating downstream. That's what excites me.
I'll just jump in specifically mentioning. I think there are two components of AI that are compelling to me. One is when you're thinking about the IKEA effect, right? So if I engage and build something myself, I'm much more likely to value it higher. If you haven't heard of it, the studies have been replicated over and over. But the long and short of it is, there's you have a bunch of engineers building a bridge out of Legos, right? And they'll rate everyone about how good is this bridge, how strong is it, how aesthetically pleasing. You take a bunch of novices and you have them rate the bridge, all of it. And there's two things. Well, there's one thing they do very well. They're very good at figuring out these people that have built these bridges, who are the engineers and who are the novices, overwhelmingly. So the engineers overwhelmingly say engineers are excellent at building bridges out of Legos. And the novices say also engineers are excellent at building bridges out of Legos, except for there's one data point they always get wrong. Does anyone know what it is? Whose rating do they get wrong? their own. So if I'm a novice, I have a tendency to rate my bridge even better than the engineers. And if I'm an engineer, I'm the best out of all the engineers because I've built it. And they call it the IKEA effect because IKEA has this clever way of making you put together your own furniture, which saves on cost, saves on storage, and actually you like it better than better furniture simply because you built it. And so I see generative AI as with two critical opportunities, which is I think sometimes it's hard to get people to visualize exactly what's going on, which is why you need to put people into XR as fast as possible. But when they're thinking about like how does this relate and how fast is this growing, and you can put them in front of an interface that's generating content, it's a very novel way to onboard people in an enterprise who are excited about this space because now they're creating it, they're using it, and therefore they see the value versus being the talking head, trying to force why the value is there. And then I'll just say one more, which is soft skills training. So using generative AI to put behind avatars, and you can give them personas. So you're this type of person, you're sensitive about this, you like this, and then have someone naturally walk through that conversation, or better yet, when they like hit the landmines, that is super compelling and super adaptive to be able to change my simulation that quickly using generative AI and for the responses to come back very naturally. So I was thinking about that when you were talking about, where, what are the next steps of engagement with that?
No, 100%. And basically, you're making a conversation.
Yeah.
Right. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then on the other side of this, and I think just to bring in, we actually sent out a survey to a bunch of people in advance to kind of get some thoughts of kind of what the people out there are thinking, because we're a little bit, we didn't know if we were in line with other people, and so my side of things is really on the educational institution side, and the question I asked was about kind of skills that people need, and critical thinking and problem solving came up like really, really high, like more than being able to use to code or whatnot. It was all critical thinking, but also being able to use generative AI tools as well was pretty high. And I think as we deploy these and explore these opportunities for AI, the requirement for us to be practicing and developing these skills, which, as I'll talk about later, XR and things can be really good at, is going to be huge as we deploy and because we get that first draft, but we really need to have the skills to check that first draft where it's wrong, because it will be.
That's true.
Yeah, absolutely. But as Nirav said, we can't have a conversation about this without bringing in AI and generative AI, and we can talk much more about this. And I know, Nirav, you had alluded earlier when we were chatting about when we're looking at training in XR, is there a framework that you have for evaluating, what might work in XR, what may not work in XR, and so how do you look at that?
Yeah, I really think of it, and this comes from my prior work with Booz Allen. We used to think about three big questions when evaluating whether an environment is good for training. One is it cost effective to train in person? That's the obvious question for any business. Two is, and can it be cheaper and virtualized? Two, is it safe? Right? Do we need to train people on scenarios that we would never want them to physically be in? Right? And then the third is are the tools available? So again, training. Booz Allen did a lot of military training. Cost is everywhere, right? So but safe. We built out an active shooter training. You would never want to actually train in a real environment there. But you could get the sense of that, of what the environment's going to be like in VR, and prepare people, for first responders, to deal with that. And then availability, right? Right now, you don't want to take a large piece of equipment offline to have people train on it when you could virtualize it.
Right.
And it might not even be available to do. So I think those three questions are critical in asking. And beyond that, it's the value that you could have control of the full environment. So the analytics you could build into every type of interaction. When do people lose focus? When do people lose attention? Which I guess is the same thing. are they actually engaging with the material, or are they figuring out a way to work around the system to pass the exam? All of that you can measure.
Right.
You can measure collaboration between different participants because you have complete control of the environment, which you don't have in a live training or simulation environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just going to add a point to that. Like, I think, what you mentioned, which I think aligns very much with Dr. Jeremy Billinson's framework, DICE, right? Whatever is dangerous, counterproductive, expensive, and I always
Destructive.
forget. And I, which I always forget. Do you remember the I?
Impossible.
Impossible. There you go. Right, like I'm on the moon. Right, and so. But I think what's interesting is I'm slightly maybe more bullish than most in that I think you can train just about anything. I remember someone saying, for example, you need to use first principles thinking for sure, right? You need to do a root cause analysis, and you need to see if you can engineer out the problem to begin with before you decide to do the training. But then additionally, there's economies of scale that once you're starting to use XR, MR, AR, VR, whatever you like, that it's fairly easy to add on additional simulations once you have these environments built out. Because I think that's still a bottleneck with content design and creation, which generative AI is starting to impact pretty significantly. So I remember someone working with a company, and they said, there's certain things like, we're trying to get people to throw this paper into a certain part of garbage, and they're either not throwing it away or they're not. And like, obviously, we should just like put up a sign that says, throw the paper here. And I did agree with that, but the point of contention I would take is it depends. Did the sign work, right? And how bad is it if they throw paper on the ground? Is it messing up areas? Is it causing congestion? Is there a slip, trip, or fall hazard? Environmental health and safety language coming out. So actually it really does matter. So now I can put this fairly menial thing, and if I have impact that I have a reduction of 90% of what people are doing with that stupid piece of paper, and there can kind of be ROI, calculated with it in some way, suddenly these seemingly menial things that you're building a simulation for can actually be, competitive when you have a suite of simulations that are going out. So start with the big ones. You have to measure outcomes, and then there's ROI. And I feel like ROI for some reason has become like a dirty word for some reason for simulations, but ROI is always a part of value, right? Outcomes are always a part of value. And so I think there's even small ways that once you have an ecosystem, you're using economy of scales, even some of the small things, it's not really dangerous, it's not really impossible, maybe there's other solution, but if it turns out those outcomes are better, suddenly maybe I do tack on a simulation, seemingly menial. It's not great in the spectrum of all examples of the paper, but I'm highlighting an extreme of paper throwing away to highlight the issue. So
Yeah.
I get weird about this stuff.
No, I agree. And the one thing I would like to add is, when we're trying to think whether a training makes sense, what's the degree to which it evokes empathy and in the learners? And I think if your training can do that in XR better than it can do it in, in a non-XR or e-learning or environment, then that's probably a reason to have that particular training in XR. An example would be in, say, DEI training. And we've had, in some of the trainings we do here at EdStudio, we take learners through an environment where, say, they would like to feel how someone who is on the autism spectrum feels like. And in spite of having other trainings or seeing videos, reading about it, or they probably may not get the same effect as being in, put that headset on and you are in the 360-degree video with them. And it has evoked a lot of responses from people that, oh my God, I didn't realize, maybe I wasn't sensitive enough, maybe I didn't realize how my colleagues might have felt, or for students, how their classmates felt. So this sort of empathy that VR brings about, almost like a physical come emotional response, is very unique. And I think if the training can bring that out, then it's a yes. Empathy, bringing out empathy is really a big one, because that's also a leadership trait that going forward organizations are looking for. And I think, and so yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, and exactly, because I mean, learning is a fundamentally emotional thing. We always think of it as, in its cognitive terms, we often fall into that trap of skills and what you know and what you can do. But really, in order to learn, we need to have an emotional reaction, and it's very, very clear. And XR, and certainly when we engage the gamified elements and the things that video games do really well, like put you in a heightened state, they can manipulate you well, then I think it's really, really very powerful. And I would agree with you strongly there, Renu.
And transferable, measurable empathy, right? So you put someone in VR, you have them go through an experience, they come out of that simulation, and someone accidentally knocks over a cup of pencils. And the control and experimental people who have gone through VR are more likely and faster to actually pick up the pencils, right? Like a sort of it'd be like a single blind study, I guess. So, measurement of, hey, I go through this experience in the real world, I'm more likely to help. I'm more likely to talk to someone. So I think that's what's novel too, is all like the clever experiments and research of people who have been showing soft skills, empathy. It's not just like clicking through the videos anymore. You put people in VR, you want to make a difference in your company, put people in immersive simulations, and that is going to change people. For how long? I think you need to measure retention and things like that, but on a base level, certainly more that's happening there when you're clicking through the videos just to check your boxes on diversity, inclusion, ethics.
So one thing I absolutely love VR for empathy, and I've had experiences in VR that I could never have in the normal world. One of the exhibits today at the on the floor is about the process a woman goes through around whether she wants to have an abortion or not. Mind-opening. Like, as a man, I just cannot understand that, right? VR for empathy is amazing. What I think is still lacking, though, in the VR is what 2D traditionally offers, is what do I do with that information after I've felt it? How do I take the key points away? How do I take notes on that? You're in a classroom, you're talking with your colleagues, but there's no good way of taking notes, right? So there's still the basics. When I'm in a Zoom session, and we're sitting there, everyone's taking notes, they're writing down, they're looking up things that are relevant to the conversation. All of that adds to the experience. We're direct messaging each other, having background conversations, and all of that adds. Sometimes it's distracting, but all of it generally adds. We haven't figured out how to build that tooling into VR experiences yet in a coherent and effective way. And I think we need to do a lot more of that, because the empathy the experiences are amazing. There's a lot of focus and amazing talent in this ecosystem around how to make experiences that people really resonate with. But you're not going to get the business value, the return on investment, unless that output can be thrown into a learning management system, certified that this person is credentialed and able to perform the task, and here are the notes to substantiate it, and here's the exams that they're taken to qualify it.
Yeah, and I completely agree, Nirav, with that. And something I've struggled with building educational VR is kind of how you do that. And certainly you kind of have to find ways to get around it, which is scaffolding stuff either side and doing reflections outside of the experience. But if you can do that in experience, like, that's obviously the better way, and that supports productivity when you're not in a training scenario as well. But I think if we do it right, we can get around it right now, but ideally future state.
Yeah, and I wasn't saying that from criticism. It's just, aspirational. That's where.
No, it's a great
good,
call. It's
because I was getting really upset.
It's all on you.
Yeah, I think integrating XR into a system that makes sense for people really helps the adoption curve if they can attach it to something they already know. It's a good call out.
Yeah, no, I think the note-taking and things like that is definitely interesting. One of maybe in a small way, what we have at Studia on our VR campus in the rooms is we have sticky notes.
Love it.
So, and I think that's a unique feature. We love it, and our learners love it, because we can actually open up a sticky note and talk. So whatever we say is automatically converted into a sticky note, and no one else can hear us while we're creating that sticky note. And then you can go and place your sticky note wherever you want or give it to someone. You can record a little note and email it to someone. And so you have a record of what your thoughts were at that moment. So baby steps, I think, but I really feel that, yes, this is the way that one can improve. And so we're very excited to have those features. And the other one that we find, some of our learners find, is in the 360-degree videos. One of them is we take learners through, in our cross-cultural competence module, we take them through a busy bazaar in India. So if you've never got off the plane and been to India, but you have to go there to live or to work, you better get into that
Good
busy
luck.
Yeah, we take them straight into a spice market in the bylanes of Delhi. And they're actually moving and shifting, and they're experiencing that discomfort. But what is different here is we have these hotspots that come up. And right while they're experiencing this discomfort or comfort or experiences, they can answer questions related to the cultural experiences they're having. And these are recorded. If the answer is correct or wrong, they get to, it's kind of like a quiz in real time. So I think these are steps that were taken, and more organizations and training programs will or should incorporate more things. We have baby steps here, but really a great point. Great. I know, wow, we're coming, and I know Thomas wants to talk about, using VR for hard skills. Right? And the future state of XR, where the hardware is going, that was something that you wanted to share.
Yeah. So I remember, so writing this question, I was thinking, where is the technology going? What are the critical leaps in the technology that we need for this to really make sense, that it's just easy, right? That someone puts it on and they just get it. But actually, when I was thinking about it, I realized that a lot of my experiences now is with people that don't know how to put other people into XR in a meaningful way. And so I'll take two parts to this. One is, I think obviously the displays, are just leaps and bounds improving the field of view, the resolution, the responsiveness, the inside-out tracking, right? I don't know, how many of you, just a show of hands, how many of you got to try the Ant waveguide displays in the demo room the other day? Yeah. What about, did anyone go into Magic Leap at all yesterday? Okay. What about X-Reel? Did anyone try the X-Reel yesterday? Okay. So if you don't have a chance, jump into those technologies, because to me, the opacity, it's about technology merging, right? So we've always said, well, this is this is MR, this is AR, this is VR, but now you have this single device that can engage in the affordances of all of those. And so I remember with the Ant display yesterday, they actually had a mechanical mechanism that put a shield over your eye, and suddenly you could be in virtual reality. There's gaps, right? It's lenses. But so now the next step to me is, you need to demonstrate opacity, and then you need to demonstrate full view occlusion, meaning it blocks here, but also it blocks the light on the edges. That's like the mechanism that I'm really waiting for a device to do at scale. So all of these need to come along, right? These technologies are gonna merge, and the person that's wearing the glasses that look like normal glasses, which everyone has said for years, that's not new, but then also that I can switch between the views, that's going to be super compelling, because when I put an executive in a VR headset, they're like, but how does this work? How do people use it? But now if I could onboard, say with the new laptop company, Spacetop. Okay, right. So and now if I can have them say like, hey, this is just for your work, you can do this. And by the way, you hit a button, it becomes completely opaque, and I can train you remotely. That's a super great way to ease people into the medium in a way that they understand, right? Okay, now the second part of it is that this is a problem to begin with. People who don't know how to put other people into XR. So for example, it needs to be simple. They need to go into kiosk mode. They need to be able to select the right thing. You can't accidentally choose a bunch of languages and go into like French when you're supposed to be like learning about this in English. Instead of having a presentation in the late afternoon where you bore bore people for an hour about all the benefits of XR. You need to put them in and give them 10 minutes just to be in it. You need to dim the lights a little bit, like in a room. You can't be super bright. You need the right amount of people in the room, otherwise it gets crazy because you need to be able to help them out. If you have a River kit, if you didn't see River, they're a great group to check out as well, RIVR, where you can have a bunch of headsets in a room. I can hit a button, I can see everyone's view, so I know exactly who's struggling, who's not, who's embarrassed to share. So one is the hardware needs to get there, and it is getting there. And I'm sure we're excited for like all the Big Apple, right, coming out this Monday and seeing what's going to happen with that. But then additionally, people that understand the user experience and how people need to XR. You can have the best equipment in the world, but if you introduce them in the wrong way, they're going to have a bad experience. And if it's about knowledge transfer, it's about outcomes, about how my feeling relates to the real world, man, if you mess that up, you're transferring a lot of motion to the real world as well. So one part is hardware, and one is people like us in this room, people that know how to lead people through immersive experiences. And I think that needs to evolve as much as the hardware itself, and design it for that matter.
Just want to add one thing, and I can accessibility, right? You're adding there's so many new modes of input, and there's so many different people with different abilities that we really have to make a focus on accessibility and designing for accessibility, not from a perspective necessarily of 508 compliance and a checklist, but more of the more multimodal way of interacting, using more senses to interact, makes for a better experience. If you're going to have audio, have subtitles available. Just by default, whether you're hearing impaired or new to the language, or just if you're in a noisy environment, it can be helpful, and let people turn it off when they want. Just design principles that I think are really critical, and we have a lot to learn from other education particularly that has really led the way in that.
Actually, it sounds crazy, but actually the visually impaired as well. So MIT has a startup that's come out to this end, which is people that have used augmented reality for mapping. So there's actually sound bites with spatial audio. So it's Google Maps, but I have little spheres around and I can walk towards them. Same thing, you can actually be very inclusive with XR, with audio only and generative AI features that are actually more inclusive, which seems counterintuitive because it's like glasses that you put on. But like there's really clever use cases for this space as well.
Quick plug, xraccess.org has great resources for anyone who wants to design for accessibility. I use them all the time, love them.
Great. I want to shift gears. Louise waiting patiently to talk about the role of education institutes, to support this transition that we have, and also with the youngsters today, the younger generation expecting XR, and they're using it in a lot of ways already. So, how do you think education institutions can help transition to this future state?
Yeah, so I'd like to talk about this in a couple of ways, because I think we all have a different view of what education is and what educational institutions should do, from K to 12 through PSI through kind of everything else. And I think really, from an individual level, I think we're there to help someone prepare for the present and the future, whatever that might be for them. And what we've developed in our education system at different levels is kind of this idea, and sometimes these two sometimes conflicting ideas, that we are like in the business of worker production, at the same time in the business of human production. And ideally those are the same thing, but often there is kind of a conflict in what the objective is there. From a worker production perspective, kind of working in competency-based education and working with employers, it's clear that while there is a skills gap, employers are still quite keen for a lot of that responsibility for filling that gap to be transferred still onto educational institutions and individuals before they get into the workplace, so they can hit the ground running. And certainly that was my experience working up in Canada, trying to introduce micro-credentialing and upskilling for kind of technical areas. And that's this is fine, and it's definitely a role that we need to play. And I think there's a lot of value to XR in that space because the current way that educational institutions are set up are really about knowledge. They're about long-form fixed credentials that test you on something that might be easy to assess, but not actually something that's meaningful and very useful. So when we talk about authentic assessment, that's actually getting you to do the thing that is going to be useful to you. When we talk about like learning through failure in a low stakes environment, that gets you to practice in a way where you can get immediate and actionable feedback. Like those are the things that our current systems don't do very well, that are hugely effective, and that XR has the potential to revolutionize. And so we can, from that perspective, skills training, and even getting into those soft skills, putting people in repeatable situations that feel real, that aren't just about the technical, but bringing complexities, they bring in different applications, different scenarios, hugely beneficial. So that's that. I won't talk about, like, I know that Rainu might want to add to that as well. So XR hugely valuable in that skills gap piece of preparing our learners for what they're going to find. But on the other side of this, like we've just identified like all the ways that things might change, but really we have no idea. What we do know is that it's going to change, it's going to keep changing, and we are going to live in a world that we have to produce people who are constantly able to adapt. They will look at me and say, "You have 6 careers? Oh, honey." And that's what they're going to do, right? Because they are just so, I mean, I'm sure you've met some of the youngsters here here this weekend, and they've already owned like 6 businesses, and they're like, they just blow my mind, some of the young people who I've met. And we have to adapt to them as well as them adapting to us to a certain extent. So we need to help them in our educational systems to develop a sense of lifelong learning, these critical thinking skills that are going to be applied generally. And we need to learn how to actually value critical thinking skills. It's one of those things that we think we want, but when we actually get someone who can think critically, it's a little bit scary. And we don't quite know what to do with them. But they are going to become increasingly important. And again, when we stick people in these scenarios in XR that are repeatable, that we can get that are data rich, and we're getting better at collecting the right kind of data, because it does have to be useful and not just the data we can collect. We're bad at that. But there's a huge amount of opportunity to really get people into the short training that responds to the needs and get us there. And the problem with school, if you don't like it, is that it convinces you that you're not very good at learning. And that is a disaster for your future, because you will not want to do it anymore. If we can use all of the benefits of these tools with kids, with young adults early, take advantage of the things they're already doing at home, then we're going to give them that sense of efficacy, self-efficacy going forward, that whatever comes at them, they can build, they can respond to. So XR, I'm hugely excited about, with the capabilities, the possibilities there, as long as we're sensible. The other side I just want to bring on, because I'm a bit passionate about kind of social, environmental justice, all that good stuff. I think that a huge thing that we have to be mindful of is that the kids today, the young people, and well, anybody, they are also going to shape the future of work through their values. And the work we do as a humanity is a manifestation of the values that we hold. And XR will change the values that our young people have. When you can transport yourself to a different place and experience the natural world, when you can experience someone else's experience on the other side of the world, that changes your set of values. And that will change what we demand of our workplaces in terms of what they do and how they do it. And we, as the older generation who are a little bit more rigid and haven't had that, we are going to have to respond to these kids who are coming in and saying, no, that I expect more because of all of these experiences that I have had, and that excites me and scares me.
Awesome. Thank you. That was great, great information. I definitely want to make some time for questions. So yeah, does anybody have any questions? Well, did you guys want to finish up? I'm sorry, I didn't want to.
No, I think
No, great for questions.
great way to end,
Yes.
Louise, and I think we can open it up for any comments or questions. Yeah.
Perfect. We have any questions in the audience? Awesome.
Louise, could you please tell us about swimming with orcas and how that works with your XR development career?
Thank you, Angelina. A little bit of a non sequitur, but very quickly. I had the opportunity last year to swim, to go on an all-women expedition to the Arctic fjords of Norway, to study the behavioral impacts of humans on the orca during the herring run. And yes, I got to snorkel with them in the ocean and humpbacks, and that was a life-changing experience. And part of the reason for me going was to develop a virtual experience that would help develop a sense of connection with the planet, start asking to start that behavioral change and build those relationships that hopefully start us on a path towards changing the way we do work. That's how I integrated that. Whew.
Awesome. Do we have any other questions in the audience?
Thank you. Great panel discussion. Thank you for sharing your insights with us. So oftentimes XR training is hailed as the silver bullet, faster, cheaper, safer, more effective, and so on. What do you see as, in terms of proving that it does make a bigger impact and there are significant quantifiable benefits for XR training? What do you see are the dimensions that we should be measuring impact as opposed to just productivity or how quickly you train and so on?
Yeah, I'll just say one of the biggest mistakes I see training organizations, like external, the Strivers, the Tailspins, Accenture Songs of the world make, is that they become overly reliant on how fast the training goes. For example, it's great that I did it 200% faster, but if people are actually getting injured in the field more as a result of it, I'm not measuring that. So it's totally case dependent, but I think we've really relied on Kirkpatrick's level of measurement and only gone a few levels in, when we really need to put our money where our mouth is and saying, hey, I'm running this experiment. I'm showing you that these people are going to make more money. These people are going to be safer, and I'm going to measure that. These people, when they're actually constructing something, they're going to build it better, faster there. Not just that I'm going to report that I like this more. I'm going to self-report more knowledge transfer. I'm going to self-report. It's so inaccurate. And I got to say, I've been pretty disappointed recently with training organizations, especially with soft skills, that aren't willing to take the bet and say, hey, I'm going to do this in a way that's going to make your people better in the field. So it's totally case dependent, but it needs to be field transfer, because that is where it shines, and that is where you're going to calculate our ROI and ultimate value.
And that all has to be integrated in your entire plan, right? Like, how do you transfer that learning and that demonstration from the virtual?
It holds you more accountable, right?
And really have that sense up front of really, really well-established metrics that align to what you're trying to achieve, and have that drive everything you do. And unfortunately, that is still, even within education organizations, within everything, that's a really hard to get people to be willing to do, and what a lot of us are trying to get more and more people to really invest their time and money in rigor and meaning.
And we've done it. We've done the research. Like when I was at Tesla, we've measured outcomes. It really does work. People really are better, faster, more safe. You can measure time savings. Go to any factory in the world, measure how, some sort of accident that's shutting down the line. Oh my goodness, the tiniest thing, like I was joking about the paper thing, but a crumpled paper that's, congesting an area or something, maybe slows you down by seconds, and there's an ROI of $1 million at the end of the year. So it does work. I've done it. Other people can do it too.
Good stuff. Okay, we have one more question. We have about a minute left, but let's hear from everybody. Here you go.
You all have spoken a lot to empathy, which I also think is a good value to have, and you hear a lot about it in the press about how businesses need more empathy and their leaders. And I'm curious what you would suggest is the best metric or type of metric that is either currently or should be measured on that front.
Anyone else can go?
Please.
No, Renu, you go.
I think empathy is one of those which is pretty subjective, and it's hard to really measure it. But one of the ways would be from self-reported, pre-training, post-training. How do you feel about your empathy level before and after training? That would be something that would make a difference. And also, I think how the others around you, people you work with, how do they, your interaction with them, how does that change over a period of time? And because it is subjective, both self-reflection as well as reflection from the others around you would, I think, could be built into the training program so that could be then measured at the end of it. So that's a start from my point of view.
If I could just say one
Yeah.
thing real quick. Empathy, for me, is really more about engaging and being part of a conversation. So the question of metrics, I'm struggling with that because it's not something that we could easily measure on a Scantron or by a defined metric after addressing a quiz. It is how you perform with that knowledge and how it informs your downstream perspective of who you're engaging with, right? And that needs to be tested through a conversation or through a dialogue. And the AI tools that are coming online can help simulate this. So oddly, the test of empathy is going to be done by the same tools that we're using to teach empathy. And we need to tighten that loop between training, performance, or training, application, performance, and reevaluation, right? And the tighter we get that loop, the better we're going to have people training to how they perform. So that doesn't answer the question, but just perspective.
Awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. What an amazing panel. Can I get a picture with all of you guys on the stage?
Please add us on LinkedIn as well. We'd really happy to build our network.